So the way that we started the conversation, so Jack and I previously built another company called Replica, and then we sold that to a company called Occipital. And Jack's background, he's a software engineer with a focus on computer vision. And the way that we actually met was I had previously sold a different business and was looking to get into something interesting, not just something that would pay. And I was really interested in self-driving cars, and I thought this would be a fantastic thing to get into. And this was 2013, and one of my best friends was in the lab over at GW, and they had some self-driving car work going on, and it was an automation lab led by Gabe Sibley. And so I reached out to him, and he said, "Well, self-driving cars are really hard. Let's make a mobile app." And so I was like, "Okay, we'll do that." And we got a little bit into it and realized we needed some additional manpower, right? So we needed another founder or so. And I asked my friend Vince, was like, "Who's the best engineer in the lab?" And they said this guy named Jack. Brandon and Vince were other co-founders of the company. And I was like, "Well, great, let's get Jack on the team." And that's kind of how we met. And after we sold to Occipital, it was about a year and a half after starting the company. Jack's been over at Occipital for a couple of years. I've been building another company, and we've been talking just back and forth a little bit about what might be next, and both interested in robotics and automation. And ultimately, I think that I've had a big focus on like two areas of technology, like for the last maybe 2 decades, right? The thing that's always been interesting to me is leverage, right? So if you say the ultimate scenario of leverage is that you could engineer something like an organism that would literally exist and perpetuate itself to do whatever you want it to do, right? That is what we've done with crops. That's what we've done with livestock. That's what we've done, and not necessarily in a very advanced manner. We've done it in a form of like, I'm going to breed these two bean stalks to get the kind of beanstalk that I want. And then over thousands of years, now you have something like corn, right? Which is just completely different from what it originally was in the natural state, right? They're wild type species, right? And so that's what is like maybe the maximum leverage, is something that you generate once to then go and replicate and perpetuate itself to do what you want it to do, right? Like cattle now. The tier below that would be generate something that goes and does what you want it to do, but it can't replicate itself. And that's really what we're looking at in robotics, right? So we have to make the robot, we have to go and get the thing set up to be able to run around, and we have to teach it to be able to do the task we want it to do. We have to make it one time, but the objective is that it'll go out and do a bunch of work for us. And if we make something incredibly durable, then it can do a lot of work for us, as opposed to just, it'll do it for 2 weeks before it dies kind of deal, right? And so when Jack and I were having these conversations in the early days, before starting Scythe, there was something that he brought up, which was nobody's really doing outdoor autonomy, right? Like the idea of autonomy for outdoor scenarios is very, very nascent. Not a lot of work's been done and put into it, but there's definitely some interesting science and technology to build out there. And we were talking about various use cases, and one day Jack's riding his mower. He's got 2 acres in Boulder, and it just hits him. He's like, "Wait a minute, like I'm doing something outdoors right now. I'm mowing the grass. I hate mowing the grass. Why am I mowing the grass? We should make robots to mow this grass." He calls me up and tells me this, and I was like, "I also hate mowing grass. Let's go ahead and do this." And between the two of us, we had software and sales covered, but we needed somebody for hardware, because you kind of need to be able to do software, you need to be able to do business development, and you also need to do hardware, because you have to actually build the robot, right? And he said, "There's this brilliant guy over at Occipital. We call him the Wonderkin. His name's Davis, barely able to drink legally, but he's a wizard in hardware." I was like, "Great, let's talk to him." And then Jack introduced me to him, fell in love with the guy. He's super sharp, incredibly kind, thoughtful, all around just great person. And so that's kind of how Scythe began. And that was, I want to say, late 2017. Then we raised our first round of capital in the first, like maybe towards the end of the first quarter of 2018. And all along, we've kind of been analyzing this, and true to the quality of my co-founders, there's been a strong analysis based on like first principles of what are we actually trying to solve, and what's the best way to go into it from an engineering dynamic, right? And the initial thought was, well, if we make a robot, the goal is we make one design and then we can make millions of them and then they run around. So it might make more sense to make something smaller. And so we started with a 21 inch. We literally, to make the first prototype, we ordered an electrical or an electric mower off of Amazon Prime. It showed up at the office in San Francisco. We took the whole thing apart and took the electric motor and the deck out of this 21 inch Greenworks machine, built an 80/20 frame around it and had it driving around a parking lot, right? And it was kind of like, oh, this is proof of concept. And when we showed the designs to landscapers, they were like, it's too small. The wheels are on backwards. This is, we love your idea. We don't like this execution. And we kind of learned that there's this, this balance that has to be struck, right? You have the goal of the robot engineer is to say, I want to make something that is the perfect engineering solution and can do all of the things. The landscaper is like, this doesn't fit my archetype for the equipment that I'm used to. It looks small, it's not powerful, I'm afraid it's going to break. All these things kind of like run in the cycles. And so we went, and over the course of 4 prototypes, we've gone from that small unit to then a 36 inch deck, and then another larger, thicker 36 inch deck to now the Caribou unit, which is what you see on our website now. It's a 52 inch machine, about 1,000 pounds. Definitely looks like a commercial mower, standard form factor. And all of a sudden it's like landscapers, as every time we step up, it's like landscapers say, okay, this is starting to look a little more real. And then Bighorn, which was our 3rd gen, it was like, oh, this is a real thing. And you see the guys like standing on it with their feet. They like kick the tires. They do the normal landscaper thing of like, let me like get tactile with this to make sure it's not going to fall apart on me. And now we're at Caribou and it's like, oh, this is a real thing. And so going back to the full circle here, the whole philosophy has been all along, like build something that will last, build something that's going to be incredibly durable. And when you analyze things from first principles and say, well, there's gas powered systems today, what would be the ideal scenario? Is electric possible? And then once you realize Teslas are running around, EVs are building up the whole, like the framework for the vendor network and the components and everything, it starts to make a lot of sense. And then you say, well, we can reduce the complexity by several orders of magnitude. We can reduce the component number by orders of magnitude. And these things are going to be far more durable as a result. And ultimately, that's what landscapers want.